My husband left me for a woman 15 years younger. 3 months later, he showed up at my door, crying, saying she drugged him, stole everything he owned, and whispered, "Please, you're the only person who can save me." The man standing on my front porch barely looked like my husband. His expensive navy blue suit was wrinkled and stained. His beard had grown in unevenly. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands were trembling so badly he couldn't even keep them in his pockets. 3 months earlier, Ryan had walked out of our marriage without looking back. Now, he couldn't even look me in the eyes. His lips quivered before he finally whispered, "Hannah, please." Then he broke down. Not fake tears. Not the kind of tears people cry when they get caught. These were the tears of someone whose entire world had collapsed. "I've lost everything," he said between sobs. "She drugged me. She stole everything I own. And if you don't help me, I don't know where else to go." I stared at him. 3 months ago, I had begged this same man not to leave. Now, he was the one begging me. And as I looked into the face of the man who had shattered my heart, I realized something. Sometimes karma doesn't knock. Sometimes it cries on your front porch. My name is Hannah. I'm 41 years old. And this is the story of how the man who destroyed our marriage came back begging for another chance, only to discover that forgiveness and reconciliation are two very different things. For 14 years, Ryan had been my best friend. At least, that's what I believed. We met at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by mutual friends in Columbus, Ohio. I was 27. He was 29. He made me laugh before he even asked for my name. By the end of the evening, we'd talked about everything from baseball to our favorite childhood cartoons. He called me the very next morning. 2 years later, we were married. Our life wasn't glamorous. We didn't travel the world. We weren't wealthy. But we built something that felt solid. Ryan worked as a financial consultant. I managed marketing for a regional healthcare company. Together, we bought a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. Weekend coffee on the back patio became our tradition. Friday night takeout became our ritual. Every anniversary, Ryan would leave a handwritten letter on my pillow. Nothing extravagant. Just simple words reminding me that he loved the life we'd built together. Those letters became my favorite gifts, which is why I never imagined the man who wrote them would one day tell me I wasn't enough. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs. At the time, I called them stress. Ryan started staying later at work. Then came the business dinners. Then weekend conferences. His phone, once forgotten on the kitchen counter, never left his hand. He smiled at messages he never shared. He laughed at jokes I wasn't part of anymore. When I asked if everything was okay, he always had the perfect answer. "Work's just crazy. I've got a big client. I'm exhausted." I believed him, because trust doesn't disappear overnight. It fades quietly, one excuse at a time. Then came the gym. Ryan suddenly cared about things he'd never cared about before. Designer clothes, expensive cologne, perfect haircuts every 2 weeks. He started talking about aging like it was some kind of disease. "We're not getting any younger," he'd say, staring into the bathroom mirror. At first, I thought he was having a midlife crisis. I even tried supporting him. I joined him on evening walks, cooked healthier meals, suggested we take a vacation together. But every time I reached for him, he seemed just a little farther away. One Friday evening, I surprised him at his office. I had picked up his favorite Thai food and thought we could have dinner together before driving home. His assistant looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said. "I thought Ryan already left." My stomach tightened. "He told me he was working late." She frowned. He left almost 2 hours ago. I smiled politely, thanked her, walked back to my car, and told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he stopped for gas. Maybe he met a client. Maybe. It's amazing how many lies we'll tell ourselves before we're willing to believe someone else is lying to us. That night, Ryan came home around 10. He kissed my forehead, apologized for working late, and asked what I'd had for dinner. I looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time in 14 years, I wondered if the man standing in front of me even knew who I was anymore. The truth finally arrived 2 weeks later. Not through a text message, not through a lipstick stain, not through a private investigator, through a photograph. My friend Melissa sent it without realizing what she was about to destroy. "Isn't this Ryan?" That was the only caption. The picture had been taken at a rooftop restaurant downtown. Ryan was sitting across from a woman I had never seen before. She couldn't have been older than 26. Long blonde hair, bright red dress, beautiful, young. Her hand rested on top of his. Not accidentally, not casually, intimately. Ryan was smiling the way he used to smile at me. I must have stared at that picture for 20 minutes, waiting for my brain to tell me it was fake, waiting for someone to explain it away. No explanation ever came. Instead, Ryan walked through the front door carrying grocery bags like it was any other Tuesday. He smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." I quietly turned my phone around and placed it on the kitchen counter. His smile disappeared instantly. He didn't ask where I'd gotten the picture. He didn't deny it. He didn't even pretend. He simply closed his eyes, let out a slow breath, and said the words that ended my marriage. "I was going to tell you." My voice barely worked. "Who is she?" He looked at the floor. "Her name is Lila." Silence. Then came the sentence I'll never forget for as long as I live. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Hannah, but I fell in love with her." It felt like all the air had vanished from the room. 14 years together, reduced to a single sentence. I asked the question every wife asks. Was I not enough? Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "This isn't about you." I almost laughed. Of course it was about me. Our marriage, our vows, our life. Everything was about me. But Ryan kept talking. "Lila makes me feel alive again." Alive. That one word cut deeper than all the others. "So what am I?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Too long. Then he answered. "I think we've just grown into different people." No, he had. Not me. I was still the woman who had stood beside him through layoffs, family funerals, financial struggles, and 14 birthdays. I was still the woman who believed marriage meant staying when life became ordinary. Apparently, Ryan had decided ordinary wasn't enough anymore. He packed 2 suitcases that same weekend. Before walking out the front door, he turned toward me one last time. "I never wanted to hurt you." I looked him straight in the eyes. That doesn't make it hurt any less. The front door closed. His car disappeared down the street. And for the first time in 14 years, the house was completely silent. I stood in the living room surrounded by photographs of a marriage that no longer existed. I thought losing Ryan was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I had no idea. The woman he chose over me was about to destroy him in ways I never could have imagined. 3 months passed. Not one phone call. Not one text message. Not one apology. Ryan disappeared from my life as completely as if those 14 years had never happened. At first, I kept expecting him to realize he'd made a mistake. I hated myself for feeling that way. Every time my phone buzzed, a tiny part of me wondered if it was him. It never was. Instead, I focused on surviving. I started seeing a therapist every Thursday evening. I painted the guest bedroom I'd always wanted to redecorate. I donated half of Ryan's old clothes to a local shelter after he never came back for them. Little by little, I stopped crying every morning. Then one rainy Tuesday evening, everything changed. A knock echoed through my house. I glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my breath caught. Ryan stood on my porch. For a moment, I genuinely didn't recognize him. 3 months earlier, he'd left wearing tailored suits, designer watches, and enough confidence to fill an entire room. Now, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Dark circles framed his eyes. His lip was split. His jacket was soaked from the rain. He clutched a small backpack. That was all he had left. "Hannah," his voice cracked. "Please, don't close the door." I should have. Every logical part of me wanted to. Instead, I stepped back. He walked inside slowly, staring at the familiar living room like he no longer belonged there. Because he didn't. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. "Finally," he whispered. "I ruined everything." I folded my arms. "What happened?" Ryan lowered himself onto the couch. He looked 20 years older than the man who had walked out 3 months earlier. "It started out exactly the way I thought it would." He gave a bitter laugh. "Lila made me believe I'd finally found happiness." He stared at the floor. "We traveled almost every weekend. She loved expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, wine tastings, boat parties, private clubs. I felt young again." Every sentence felt like another knife, because those were things he'd stopped wanting to do with me. He continued. "She always had friends around. They were fun, successful. They made me feel like I belonged." I stayed silent. He wasn't telling me anything I hadn't already imagined. Then, his expression changed. But after about 2 months, something felt different. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "She became obsessed with my finances." I didn't answer. Ryan continued talking. "She kept saying couples shouldn't have financial secrets. She convinced me to open a joint account." My stomach tightened. I thought it meant she trusted me. He laughed at himself. "No. I was just an idiot." He admitted that Lila slowly convinced him to move nearly all of his savings into accounts she could access. She claimed it would make buying a house together easier. Then she encouraged him to invest in what she called an exclusive business opportunity. It sounded legitimate. There were contracts, lawyers, meetings. Everything looked real. I asked quietly, "How much?" Ryan swallowed hard. "Almost everything." The room fell silent. 14 years of savings. Gone. He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I kept thinking we were building a future together. Instead, he had been financing his own destruction. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Lila said one of her friends was hosting a private celebration. He rubbed his shaking hands together. There were maybe 30 people. Music. Champagne. Everyone dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. At first, everything seemed normal. Lila barely left his side. She introduced him as the love of her life. She kissed him in front of everyone. She laughed, danced, held his hand. Ryan smiled bitterly. "I thought I'd won?" He paused. Then she handed me another drink. He looked directly at me. I don't remember anything after that. The next thing he remembered was waking up in a luxury hotel room. His head pounding, his mouth dry, his clothes half unbuttoned. A woman he'd never seen before was asleep beside him. I panicked. I didn't even know where I was. Before he could process anything, the hotel room door burst open. Lila stormed inside. 3 people followed behind her, one of them already recording everything on a phone. Lila screamed loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. "You cheated on me." Ryan insisted nothing had happened. He couldn't even remember arriving at the hotel. The woman beside him claimed they had spent the entire night together. Ryan shook his head violently. I knew it wasn't true. But nobody believed me. Lila threw an engagement ring at him, cried hysterically, called him disgusting. The people recording cursed at him. Someone shoved him. Another person called him a liar. The entire scene felt rehearsed, because it was. I was so confused. Ryan whispered. I couldn't even think. He left the hotel humiliated, believing the nightmare was finally over. It wasn't. When he reached the apartment, Lila was gone. Every closet, empty. Every drawer, empty. Even the framed photographs they'd taken together had disappeared. He tried calling her, disconnected. Her social media accounts, gone. Then his bank called. Multiple wire transfers, large cash withdrawals, new credit cards, personal loans, electronic signatures. Everything had happened within hours. My accounts, he whispered, were empty. I stared at him. Didn't the bank stop the transfers? They said everything appeared authorized. Of course it had. Lila had spent weeks gaining his trust, collecting passwords, watching him type PIN numbers, learning security answers. By the time Ryan realized what she'd done, she had vanished. Then things became even worse. The apartment lease had never actually been in her name. The luxury car she drove had been rented. The business she'd convinced him to invest in didn't exist. Even Lila wasn't her real name. Police later discovered she'd been using fake identification for years. The woman Ryan had fallen in love with had never existed. She had been playing a role, and Ryan had played exactly the part she wanted. I lost my savings, my retirement, my investments, my credit. My job found out after the fraud investigation started. They let me go. His voice cracked. I have nothing left. Silence settled between us. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The irony was impossible to ignore. 3 months earlier, Ryan had walked away believing he was trading an ordinary wife for an extraordinary life. Instead, he had traded loyalty for manipulation, trust for deception, love for a carefully planned scam. Finally, he looked at me with tears streaming down his face. I know I don't deserve your kindness. I know I destroyed us. I know I broke your heart. He took a shaky breath. But I don't have anyone else. My parents are gone. My brother won't answer my calls. My friends disappeared. I've been sleeping in my car for 4 nights. He wiped his eyes, then said the words I never imagined I'd hear. Hannah, please. You're the only person I have left. I looked at the man I'd once promised forever. The man who had shattered my heart without looking back. Now, he had nothing. No money, no home, no job, no future. And for the first time since he'd walked out of our marriage, the decision rested entirely with me. Would I help the man who had destroyed my life? Or would I close the door the same way he'd closed it on me 3 months earlier? I looked at Ryan for what felt like an eternity. 3 months earlier, he hadn't looked back once as he walked out of our home. Now, he couldn't even lift his head. Every part of me wanted to remind him of the nights I cried myself to sleep, the birthdays we'd planned together, the promises he'd broken, the future he'd thrown away. But another part of me, the part that had survived all of this, refused to let bitterness become the ending of my story. I took a slow breath. You can stay here tonight, I said calmly. Ryan looked up, shocked. Really? Only tonight? Hope flickered across his face. I immediately shook my head. Don't misunderstand me. I'm giving you a roof over your head tonight because I refuse to become the kind of person who leaves someone with nowhere to go. But tomorrow, You start rebuilding your own life. His shoulders dropped. He nodded silently. I understand. That night, I made up the guest room. The same room Ryan had once promised would become a nursery someday. Life has a strange sense of irony. The next morning, I made coffee. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Not as husband and wife, not even as friends. Just two people whose lives had crossed in painful ways. Ryan finally spoke. I know you're wondering why I came to you. I already know. You came because everyone else shut the door. He lowered his eyes. Yes. Over the next few days, I helped him, but only in ways that would allow him to stand on his own again. I drove him to the police station to finish filing additional fraud reports. I helped him organize the paperwork his attorney needed. I found a small church-run housing program that offered temporary accommodation while he searched for work. I even bought him a week's worth of groceries. Every time he thanked me, I simply nodded, because this wasn't about getting him back. It was about making sure that one terrible decision didn't destroy two lives instead of one. A week later, Ryan stood in my driveway holding a small duffel bag. I found a room to rent. I'm starting a temporary job on Monday. I'm trying to fix my credit. For the first time since he'd returned, I saw a tiny glimpse of the man he'd once been. Not the arrogant man who left me, a humbled one. He hesitated before speaking again. Hannah, I know I don't deserve this, but if there's even the smallest chance, I'd like to come home someday. I looked at him quietly. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally knew exactly what I wanted. No, Ryan. His face fell. I've forgiven you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. He opened his mouth to speak. I gently raised my hand. When you left me for Lila, you didn't just leave our house. You left our marriage. You walked away from every promise you ever made to me. Tears filled his eyes. I know, I continued. You've changed. I believe that. I also believe you're genuinely sorry. But trust isn't something you ask for after you've shattered it. It's something you protect before you lose it. The tears rolled freely down his face. I love you. For the first time, those words didn't move me. Instead, I answered with complete honesty. I believe you think you do. But real love doesn't abandon someone the moment life starts feeling ordinary. Silence settled between us. Then I said the words that finally closed that chapter of my life. I forgive you because I deserve peace. But I won't spend the rest of my life wondering when another Lila might come along. I deserve better than living with that fear. A week later, I officially filed for divorce. Ryan didn't fight it. When the judge signed the final papers several months later, Ryan quietly wished me well before walking away. That was the last time I saw him. For over a year. Life slowly became peaceful again. I rediscovered old friends, started hiking every Saturday morning, accepted a promotion at work. For the first time in years, my happiness no longer depended on someone else's choices. Then, almost 2 years after my divorce, I met Ethan. It happened at a neighborhood charity fundraiser. He was a high school history teacher. Kind, patient, funny without trying. Most importantly, he listened. He never made me compete for his attention, never made me question my worth, never made me feel like I had to become someone younger, prettier, or different, just to deserve his love. He loved me exactly as I was. A year later, we stood beneath a canopy of autumn leaves surrounded by family and close friends. As I slipped my hand into Ethan's, I realized something that surprised even me. I wasn't grateful for the pain Ryan had caused, but I was grateful I hadn't allowed it to define the rest of my life. Sometimes people ask me if I regret helping Ryan. The answer is no. Helping him wasn't for him. it was for me. Because compassion is not weakness. It's a choice. A choice that let me walk away with my dignity intact. I later heard through mutual friends that Ryan eventually found steady work again. He rented a small apartment. He lived quietly. He never remarried. I truly hope he found peace. But not every story is meant to begin again. Some stories exist to teach us who we are and who we should never become. Ryan lost everything chasing the illusion of a perfect life. I thought I'd lost everything when he left. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost my future. I had simply made room for the person who was always meant to be part of it. Because sometimes karma isn't revenge. Sometimes, karma is simply giving you exactly what you chose. Ryan chose betrayal. I chose healing. And in the end, only one of us found the life we truly deserved. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean giving someone a second chance, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.